Well, hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Harriford. I live here in Jacksonville, Florida. What I'm going to talk to you today is about how the mental health system impacted my family and ultimately failed my family between my mother, my brother, and myself. My younger brother is Henry Sean Harriford, and he struggles with mental illness. I believe he's been diagnosed at this point with schizophrenia. A little bit backstory on him. We were both born in Scotland. Our mother was a Scottish native. Our father was in the United States Navy. He ended up meeting my mother over there, and we were born there. And we lived there for quite some time. Coming to Florida, his story is very interesting. Um, he struggled with mental health issues since he was, I'd say, about 15, 16 years old. Unfortunately, I was in the Marine Corps serving our country at the time. I had no idea of what a Baker Act in Florida is called, but I think other states across the country call it like an involuntary hospitalization for mental health issues. Here in Florida, what that really means, somebody's going to be evaluated and held on a psychiatric hold for about 72 hours. And after that 72 hours, there'll be a determination made if that person needs longer care. So, through these years, I've done my own research through medical records, police reports, incident reports, and I've come to the calculation that he was what we call Baker Act or held against his will for a psychiatric hold for a total of 92 times. That's almost 100 times. As a family, we weren't allowed to know much due to HIPAA, which became an issue on locating him or even accessing help. Uh, Upon that, we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. And what I mean by that is these facilities, the process seems very secretive in nature. Um, he was being abused, not just physically, emotionally, sexually. Very hard to talk about sometimes. But at this point, I feel it's very important to tell his story as well as what ultimately led um, with him and my mother. So there's a couple instances specifically that I recall and remember that he would be released, but still needing psychiatric care. And I didn't understand until I worked in the system of what that means. Ultimately, he was out of insurance money. He still should have got treatment, but he didn't have any insurance, whether it was Medicaid or private insurance at that time. He was also on Social Security disability, and he's a victim of identity theft as well. So, without having insurance, the facilities here in Florida decided, oh, we'll just kick him out on the streets. We might see him in a few days, but we need the bed space to somebody that can pay us. And I didn't understand that logic at the time because if somebody still needs help, they shouldn't be just thrown outside. And what I mean by that, literally thrown outside, I saw him one day when I was driving to my mother's house. I was still active duty military here in Florida. I was going to my mother's house. She was having some problems with her apartment complex due to my brother being around trying to locate. You know, he wanted to see his mom, but being psychotic, that's not very good for the community. Hallucinating, hearing voices, and just appearing not in your own right mind, but you can't get any help. Um, I peeled off on the side of the road, exiting towards my mother's house, and saw a homeless man, or what appeared to be a homeless man, standing there, disheveled, long hair, wearing nothing but a bed sheet. And I didn't know until years later, until I could line up the timeline, that he had just been released within an hour from a psychiatric facility, naked, with no clothing. And I don't understand why we as a family couldn't be contacted to come pick him up, coordinate care, anything along those lines. But by the time I turned back around to see who that person was, he was gone. And I do remember just seeing his eyes and realizing that that was my brother. So that immediate next day, I went down to the courthouse here in Florida and attempted to. I didn't even know where to begin. You get no guidance because nobody can give you legal advice, but I knew I needed to be involved at some point in some fashion. So the best thing they could do was try to have him involuntarily evaluated again, and hopefully the facility of which he would be taken to would reach out to me. There was no guarantee that they would. There was no way for me to even know which facility he would go to. We had quite a few, like about 4 or 5 of the main facilities in our area, so I would have to go to each one and physically see if anyone would talk to me. It became a very burdensome task just because HIPAA. Nobody wants to talk about that. But there are provisions of HIPAA that allow individuals for continuity of care to talk to family members, which I think should be addressed. Because how can you help somebody if you don't know where they're at? But ultimately, this facility he was taken to did not reach out to me. So a couple of weeks goes by. I get this very, very horrific phone call that something's going on with my mother. And at the time, it was expressed to me like she may have been having a stroke or a heart attack. So I'm in uniform. At that time, I was on recruiting duty for the Marine Corps here in Jacksonville, Florida. So I go to the scene. I'm expecting, my mom's needing my assistance to provide first aid or whatnot, and that she's going to be fine. It's just a health scare. But when I get to her apartment complex, it's like a movie scene. Police everywhere. Things are taped off, and I'm just trying to even process what's going on. I just want to see my mother. So I talked to the police officer, and they're like, "Well, you first of all, you're in uniform," and I was like, "I really don't care," but I had some gym clothes in my car, so I quickly changed so I wouldn't be on the news in my uniform. And I'm just like, "Why won't they let me see my mom? What's going on?" Well, I didn't know it at the time, but my mom had already been deceased, and I was trying to figure out what is going on, like what happened, just like everybody else. Well, it wasn't until I overheard the police talking to the local news that my brother was involved. We said, "We've got the son." That's all they kept saying. "We've got the son. Everything's under control." Um, but I was very, very, very confused when I thought my brother was in a psychiatric hospital because that's what we had did paperwork for a few weeks prior. So that day was the longest day of my life. And around 11 p.m., I'm sorry, the incident happened around 1 p.m. So around 11 p.m., so 10 hours later, I get a call from the state attorney to come downtown. Um, they basically told me that my brother was involved and that they were going to charge him. Again, I had no idea what was going on, didn't understand the dynamics and the actual details, but that's what happened. So we get downtown, they tell me the details of everything that they're aware of, and that was it. Well, in Florida, much like I think in the rest of the country, there's different time limits, but if somebody is mentally ill and it cannot stand trial, they have to go to get competency training. Now, what I'm about to say is about 8 years worth of research when it comes to competency training. There's quite a few differences in the standard, and there's a difference between somebody parroting that information or actually knowing it and understanding it. So my brother was sent to a maximum of 5 years in the state hospital system to be restored to competency to stand trial. Now, that's without any knowing any of the details of the incident that happened with him and my mother. But in this time frame, in these 5 years, he's been abused. He's been abused to the point where it's been physical, sexual in nature by the very own caregivers that are entrusted with, taking care of him and helping him be restored to competency. It's just pretty disgusting as overall to kind of discuss, and I'm gonna try my best to give some examples, but it's things that are out of movies of what goes on in these facilities. and they're given complete access to do so because everything's kept in secret or confidential, as they like to say. Well, as a human being, not knowing everything that I knew about the court case, it was just to see him. How can we expect these individuals to get one competent, but two to be just live as basic human beings without decency? We have the United States Constitution for a reason. A lot of the things that I've seen kind of violate that, but if you start reporting it, you get labeled yourself. And that's kind of where I'm at ultimately today. And I'll come back to that about being my brother's guardian and having that threatened because of me speaking out about it. Um, the violence that he's experienced against him has been very tough to watch. It used to, I'd get a call or a notification when he was hurt. They don't call me anymore. In fact, they abuse him when they know I'm coming to visit him because they know they can get away with it. It's just hard. It's hard to understand the kind of human beings that do that kind of thing, and that's not their position. Their position should be, at least in my opinion, to help these individuals restore, if they're in there for competency restoration, to be restored, um, and be treated humanely. But unfortunately, what I've discovered is that this becomes just a dumping ground for these people that have mental health issues. And there's no proper screening for mental health issues versus traumatic brain injuries or any other neurological symptoms that could cause some of these issues that these individuals experience. So they just become lost to the system in a way. The families that I've met that have reached out to me, we all kind of have the same similar thread going on. And what I've noticed personally is if you don't agree with everybody, then you get labeled as a family member. And what I mean by that is if you don't do what everybody wants you to do, which means don't report incidents, do what the doctors say. Um, as a guardian, I have a legal right to advocate for my brother, but also in Florida, we have an informed consent law. What do you do when the providers are saying, hey, put him on this medication, but I'm not going to answer any of your questions? Is it just do as I say, not as I do? For example, there's a medication that was in a lawsuit that lost due to males having gynecomastia. My brother was one of those victims of that. And he's being forced to be on that medication that has harmed him, even though there's been no clinical benefit of him being on it. It's just where do we have the conversation again of what's in the best interest of the patient and not the best interest of the state or of the judicial system? And that's kind of where I'm at. I've been threatened and currently being threatened of having my guardianship removed because I've been labeled as a hard person to work with, when I literally am just at this point printing out the law and asking and begging medical providers, judges, can we get back to the law? Because I really don't understand this. And this is kind of blows my mind. It's more still of a dictatorship. I don't know if you see behind me, that's my retirement flag from retiring from the United States Marine Corps. And we fought for those ideals, for the Constitution, for honor, courage, and commitment. And to me, those mean a lot. That's how I lived my life. And then these types of things happen behind our backs, and it's really hard to live with as a retiree, and how I move forward with my life. I don't think my brother will ever have his day in court, given what he was accused of doing. But it seems to me he's guilty. Um, he's guilty in the fact that we don't want to presume his innocence. We're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty in America, but we're going to say people are guilty without giving them that. There's individuals that just won't get better, or they won't I won't say won't get better overall, but just with the current regime, whether that is the system itself that can't evolve to offer more options to individuals. But here we are, 2022 and beyond. His first diagnosis of mental illness was in 2005. So we're going on, that's a lot of years, 18 years of the same type of medication regime that's not working for him. In fact, he's getting worse. So it's, where does that end as far as that ideology, and where can we start to think of different ways with our current technology? Or is he always going to be labeled this way? Am I going to be labeled this way for the rest of my life? Or just actually wanting to get to the bottom of his mental illness, or at least attempt to, and help him have a decent life? Or are we just going to continue to hide all the abuses that he suffered? And he's never looked at as a victim, which it's mind blowing to me. When we have, at this point, personally, we have videos. I've been on the news quite a bit in the media about it, but I think ultimately it's like, what does that say about us as humans? What does it say about us as our culture? Um, a lot of big ideas to think about that are pretty tough to stomach some days. But you know, the system can be better. I think we can all agree upon that. And I worked in the mental health system for a while as a case manager, care coordinator here in Florida. But at that time, I was unaware that the same people I was working with were the same ones that had hurt my family. But what I can say is that we should work together. There is a way that we can all work together to help these individuals that suffer. Their stories really don't get told. I think we like to label people. Oh, that person's this, or that person just needs to take their medications. But what do you do when somebody's taken all their medications and they're still not better? Is it just continue and force that medication upon them? Where's their rights? Where's their constitutional rights? How can we balance this? I think it takes all of us to come to a table and sit down and kind of hash the things out that nobody wants to talk about. I'm always available for those kind of ideas. I understand now why other families, they reach out to me and they want to remain, I won't say silent, but they want to protect their identity, and I can see why. The last 2 weeks have been beyond stressful for me. Just listening to allegations made that are not true about myself causes a lot of stress for me and my family. Nobody should live like that. Um, I believe in honesty and fairness, and I don't know how we bring that to this kind of system, if it's even possible. But I wish we could all just agree that this isn't working. What we currently have is not working, and I'm always available to sit down and talk. And I think there's a lot more families that are willing to do that. But the system itself, I think, doesn't want to admit that there's anything wrong. And I don't know why that is. But again, so right now, my brother, we've been to every state hospital in the state of Florida twice. Because what would happen as soon as I would report a victimization, they would magically move him instead of fixing the problem. And most of the time, they would move him further away from me so I couldn't see him or find out. Due to COVID protocols in our state, believe it or not, I really haven't seen my brother in the last 3 years, even though being his legal guardian. That's a whole different rabbit hole, but been limited access to him, limited access to medical records, and just overall limited access in general. Unfortunately, I almost died last year in a car accident, and I was given 3 days to live. And I can tell my wife and kids that I love them so much every day, and they know that. But for him, he would never know. And given 3 days to live, sorry. The What hurt me the most was I tried to call, and they're like, "Oh, you need to call back when it's time for phone calls or whatnot." And I could have never talked to him again, and he would just think I'd forgotten about him. And I still carry that with me right now. It's just the inhumanity that I've experienced that watching him go through, and ultimately I carry my mother's strength. My mom saw it way before I ever did because she lived it when I was in the Marines trying to get my brother help. And I think I can connect my brother with doctors that could probably help him, but the system here in Florida anyway is just trying not to let that happen. But I know we're getting close to time there, but I just want to appreciate everybody listening. I hope my family story can just probably provide you a little bit of insight on what's going on in America here with the mental health system, and we need to change this thing. Um, it's well overdue. People are still struggling. We can do better. If you ever need me, I'm always available. Um, and thank you for your time.